With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm with S.J. Jennings, and we are talking about fatherhood, Father's Day, talking about being dads.
Yeah, coming up June 21st.
June 21st.
Right.
Yeah, feeling bad for the moms. Mother's Day in the midst of COVID. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it got
tomorrow.
Kind of hijacked.
Yeah, it did.
Sherry would tell you, too, that her birthday, which is March 14th, it was right at the beginning. We had all kinds of plans to celebrate with her. And it all got waylaid.
Same with Robin, March 16th. And
I love how, we're saying the number, we're saying the dates intentionally so that when they listen, they know we know when their birthdays are.
That's right. That's Father's Day bonus right there.
I made that mistake early on in our relationship, Sherry and I. I somehow got her birthday confused that it was not the 14th, but the 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day. So two of my favorite days of the year.
Yeah.
I conflated them, but haven't made that mistake since, huh, honey?
Yeah, I'm sure she's we got a lot to talk about. So let's jump into this series.
You've already wounded them.
The podcast is about the secrets to fatherhood. And we started last week with just a swing at, you got to get your heart back.
An encouragement, really.
If you're going to father well, if you're going to be a good friend, if you're going to do this husband thing well, then going to the foundation, which is your heart, your belovedness, you being a beloved son first. It's a big reason why we wrote The Heart of a Warrior. Before you can become the warrior, you have to become the beloved son. Really, to be a dad, I think you said it last week, it's so tangled up, right?
Oh, yeah.
Your perception of the heavenly father, your perception and experience with your earthly father,
and other father figures in your life.
All authority figures, moms too, and how they handled your heart. It just is easy then to step into this second of the podcast series in being wounded.
Yep.
As a dad, we're on record and we've wounded our kids.
Yep.
Just like our dads wounded us, right? Whether your dad was an all-star or not, and you are trying to move in his footsteps or as far away as possible,
right,
and blaze some new trail as a dad.
Mm-hmm.
Even that has something to do with being wounded.
Oh, your decision, do I want to be like my dad or not be like my dad? I mean, no doubt the woundedness, okay, well, I was wounded by my dad, so I don't want to be like him. But you can be wounded by your dad and want to be just like him too.
Yeah. Like you said, it's tangled up.
Yeah.
And seeing it and observing it is what our invitation is this week for Exploring More.
Right.
It's not if wounded. And honestly, in 30 minutes, we're not going to get into the battle and into the intricacies of the enemy. But we do have to say that there's an enemy who's come to steal, kill, and destroy. He's come to separate us from the love of the Father so that we could not love well as a father. The enemy sees how this works, and you have to. You have to. So if you're joining us, I don't know where we are in the episodes number-wise.
Gosh, it's got to be coming close to 110.
If you're joining us in the 70s or in the 80s or the 90s, right? And you're up here in these episodes with us and you want to get more and explore more, then I'm going to recommend you jump back to Life in the Larger Story.
That was one of our
9 or 10.
Yeah, that was one of our earlier series. It's really good.
And there was a warfare series where we just talked about the larger story that your story's in and how this works, what the enemies come to do, what steal, kill, and destroy looks like, and how why wounding is so prevalent is because our hearts were missed. Our expectations went unmet. And I'm not saying all my expectations as a boy were even right or accurate.
Yeah.
You want what you want, you need what you need, but there are some common denominators between all of us as image bearers. We long to be wanted, to be noticed, to be invited, to be seen, right? The questions that we ask, whether they are well on display or whether they are covertly on display, every human being wants to be loved. because every human being was made for love, by love. It's about finding our way home to the Father and getting things out of the way that are in the way. That's where episode 1 was.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to talk this week, SJ, a little bit more about wounding. Let's just start with a reference for us when we were younger. How was your heart wounded? What was some of the perceptions and the thoughts, the beliefs and attitudes that you received in your journey with your dad? We're not dad bashing. That's not the point.
No.
We're not trying to do that. We're just trying to make sure that we help our listeners know that our dads, however they did this thing called fatherhood, didn't do it perfectly. And that's where the enemy's looking for ways to come in and establish a foothold, establish a place in which to operate from, to bring guilt, fear, shame.
Yeah.
And so sooner or later, those moments happen, and our fathers, wherever they were on their journey, right? I think of Billy Buckner. There's one. I mean, he was an all-star.
Yeah.
But he's known for the one that went right between his legs.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that memory up, by the way. Yeah. 1986 World Series. The Mets won because of one bobbled play. Hey. And I'll tell you, that guy had to leave Boston and change his name because he was getting death threats.
Yeah.
I don't know why that popped into your head.
Well, you know why I did? Because it's unfortunate that we often remember the mistakes.
Oh, yeah. You don't remember, the 193 RBIs that guy had, or,
right.
You know what I mean? His on-base percentage was, 423.
So that's all. I'm just saying that as earthly fathers, these wounding moments happen. As sons and daughters, these wounding moments happen.
I like what you said about expectations, though, because I think that ties in with where I mentioned there's sometimes where your dad wounded you or a father figure wounded you, and it's just blatant,
Oh, yeah.
Came home drunk, was beating up your mom.
Or slapped you around.
Some of the awful stories we've heard, right?
Didn't come home and you didn't see him again.
Had a bad temper, whatever it was. But then there's these ones where it's a wound from our perspective because somehow our dad didn't fulfill our expectations. But the dad wasn't necessarily in a place of intentionally. He may not even have known it happened at all.
Yeah. So what's great about that? We're talking about that as sons, but I just got to flip the coin.
I know.
Your kids are being whispered to.
No doubt.
In this interpretation. I know we're talking about scales and I've got my arms out from left to right, but we're also talking about a scale of depth.
It's all intertwined.
Height. We live in a battle.
Yeah.
And the enemy is hell-bent on wounding us at our core. If the questions we're asking, do you see me? Do you love what you see? And the method of delivering those packages, bestowing validation, worth, significance, acceptance, all these things that love is, then
which is another podcast.
And the enemy is coming to interrupt that and steal, kill, and destroy that.
Yep. And if he can get us to do it for him.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, taking the idea of love is, I have to be self-reliant in order to arrange for love for myself.
Yeah.
Because my dad didn't want to take a second and go outside and play catch with me.
Yeah.
Not knowing that my dad was trying to pay the bills at the time or whatever it was.
Fix the sink.
Those are the kind of unintentional wounding moments I'm talking about, with which then they alter how you are a dad. That's going back to our last episode, was getting your heart back.
Getting healing.
Is the first part.
Yeah, getting healing.
It's the first part of this thing. So yeah, wounding our kids. I might have to call my son because I can't.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I've got my file here.
Okay. Yeah.
Just drop it here on the table. There's quite a few complaint forms.
Yeah, we're going to have to take a break while I fix that microphone. Hang on.
There's quite a few. And unfortunately, I've had to sign for them. I go back to my story real quick because it's important to say that, one of the messages that I got from my dad, and I don't believe it was his intention, but that desire to be seen and validated and approved. I was the oldest of 4. That's a busy dad to take care of all of our hearts. And we had a lot of good family things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I just kind of outran his coverage as I began to enter into my early teens. And especially by the time I got a car and am moving, I was probably hard to catch. Even though my boyhood, I think there was a great foundation there from him. But some of the ways the enemy snuck in as he does in all boys, and I think all girls. I have girls, and that's where that file list came from. I believe, SJ, that sooner or later the enemy wants to deliver a message that you can't tell your dad. Whatever happened or whatever you did, whatever was done to you or whatever you did, the enemy is looking to drop that package of shame.
He's not safe to talk to or confide in. Yeah.
Right. And it could be a lie, or it could be, nope, that's true. That is one of the sinister packages that I think every boy or girl, if it didn't get in the door, it's on your porch.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know anybody that it didn't get in the door. That sooner or later, right? Just like in the garden, the enemy has spun this to where they took matters into their hands, and the punishment, the consequences of that is separation. They were naked and they hid. They couldn't trust the heart of the Father in that moment. And it's really been something the enemy's done over and 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 over again.
Yeah. If two people, in this case, a child and a father, are separated, if they're isolated, they're easier to pick apart.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt.
Yeah. So
doubt.
I think my dad, I was fortunate I had him in my youth. I think that when I got to be a young teen, those experimentations, the explorations, the things that come at you, the peer pressures, the social structure of middle school and junior high in the early 70s, when I was in those years. Yeah, it was just a place where uncertainty and guilt, shame, and fear entered in a variety of ways.
Just to interrupt you for a second, I mean, looking back now, can you tie your relationship and how you thought about God? When you reached that point with your dad where you didn't feel like you were capable of coming to him because of the guilt and the shame, I mean, you probably didn't think of it that way at the time, but I mean, knowing your story and what you shared in the last episode,
yeah.
I mean,
sure,
they're tied together.
I would give that some honor for sure. What you're suggesting is that my perception of the Heavenly Father actually played itself out in my relating to my earthly father.
It sounds like more so as you became a teenager than when you were a little guy.
Yeah. And my dad, I have this image in my mind through those years, those teenage years, when I had my dad's thumbs up. Stan Cabbage talks about this. I had his thumbs up that he was for me. But in those years, right, when you look at the masculine journey, the ranger stage and the warrior stage, there are just some things that he didn't know how to talk to me about and prepare me for. I think having younger siblings, he was just trying to keep us fed and alive. And he came home every day, and he loved my mom, and we had a lot of good. But I think when it gets to some of those things, SJ, in teenage years, when I needed some more of those ceremonies, the more of those talks, the more of the validation, and even the kind of forecasts like, look, this is what's going to happen. This is what's likely going to happen. I want you to be ready. I want you to be prepared. We're just speculating, but it might have made a difference in the kind of things that I did encounter and experience and experiment with, as well as maybe it would have made a difference in our relationship. So my wounding wasn't catastrophic. My wounding was more 1,000 mosquito bites.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not minimizing that. I'm just saying that when I look at the stories and hear the stories from men around the country, oh yeah, I feel like I was fortunate in many ways. But at the same time, SJ, I wasn't immune.
Sure. No one is, man. What it makes me think of is we were just doing a Thursday night Zoom gathering, because during the quarantine and all that, that was a position, honestly, that we were kind of pushed into in terms of not being able to gather with people, and we felt like it would be helpful.
Yeah.
And we did a couple of series on grief and loss. And during the first one, we talked pretty extensively about the impact of diminishment and how the enemy will come along and say, your grief or your loss is nothing compared to some other guy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I'm not trying to imply that that's what you were doing. However, I have heard guys do that before, especially in a circle of guys. We're sharing our stories or whatnot. It'll come out and, well, it's nothing compared to Joe's story or, John's or whatever. But here's what happened to me. And I think that spirit of diminishment is something to be mindful of and to be careful with. as you're hearing someone's story and as you're sharing stories of woundedness.
Because it comes on the heels of comparison.
Right.
Trying to evaluate in comparison that something weighs more, something weighs less, mine, his, theirs. And that really does open the door for the spirit of diminishment to come.
Sure. And your story is your story. How it affected you is how it affected you. Yeah, that comparison is dangerous.
Yeah, what's one of the lines, though, for you as a son? Message of the wound, if you will. What was one of the significant pieces? Again, I want to state it clearly. What I felt was my dad was for me, but I'm on my own.
Yeah.
That was kind of an overarching spell that the enemy had cast on me for sure. I felt that, the isolation of I'm on my own, don't ask, don't tell. It created an operating way, and it served me sometimes. It really did, but it wasn't ideal. It wasn't optimal.
Yeah, especially in hindsight, you can see that.
No.
Yeah.
I wish I had.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's probably one of the ones that was delivered. You know, you got to figure it out. You're on your own. I remember early on, one of the ones I received, and again, this wasn't said to me. This is the nuance of this that's so important. It's not always something that's said or here's this package, you're going to sign for it. They just come sometimes. And one of the ones that came for me was how you feel doesn't matter. We got shiz to do. You know,
Yeah.
and that's part of what I'm unraveling in the little boy's heart right now that I referred to in the first episode. Listeners, when we're talking about wounding our kids, Michael and I immediately went to how we are wounded as kids, because again, to reiterate, it's all connected. It's all interlaced. It's all woven together. So when we come back from the break, let's talk about how that's translated into
our
fatherhood. Yeah, into our fathering.
All right. We have to.
Yeah. I'm going to get my son on the phone. We'll be right back.
All right.
Here's a message for you dads from the Zoe team. Father's Day is coming up, and we want to encourage you. You've got this. Being a dad is a tremendous role, and it's one of the toughest jobs a man can step into. Whether you're attempting to blaze a trail or you're trying to step into your father's footsteps, every dad is needed. Because we believe that dads are so important, this Father's Day we're offering 2 resources to equip and encourage dads for their role. One is the 14-day devotional ebook, Being Fathered by God. It's foundational to get your heart back in order for you to be able to step in and fight for the hearts of your kids. The second resource is an audio recording from one of the Heart of a Warrior conference sessions entitled, Fighting for the Hearts of Your Kids. Your children live in the same story that you do. And what if your dad had had a battle plan to better protect and provide for your heart? Go to zoe.org and click on Explore Offers to download these resources. That's ZOWEH.org. One last thing. We are featuring a $5 additional discount on the Heart of a Warrior book. Use the coupon code HEART5. That's HEART 5. And remember, before you can become the warrior, you have to become the beloved son. Be encouraged, dads. You got this.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. I'm Michael Thompson with S.J. Jennings. Go to our website and get some of those fathering resources, the free devotional, the free audio, and we've added some things.
Discount on the book. There's a bundle, with a journal workbook. So take advantage of that.
One of the things I love that Greg's doing, our Allies director, Greg Sailors, who's been on the podcast, we're partnering with Charisma now. We're partnering with BeliefNet. We're partnering with Pathos. Trying to get this message right through the book in the hands of men so that they can start their small groups this fall.
Yeah.
1,000 new small groups in the fall through the Heart of a Warrior.
Yeah.
And Father's Day is a great time. If you're hearing this and you want to get 4, 5, or 6 books, you can't get them any cheaper than on our website, and send them to friends. Hey, if you're not tired of Zoom, do a Zoom call with 5 or 6 friends around the country.
Put your lawn chairs in the cul-de-sac 6 feet apart. You know what I mean?
We got to at least get into 4 feet. Sooner or later, they got to give us a little more nearness. But
all right, wash your hands, don't touch your face, but gather together and go through the Heart of a Warrior. It'd be good.
That would be good. So this is a hard one to talk about, right? Yeah. We're moving into this part 2 series on wounded and wounding our kids. It's not if.
Yeah.
it's you have. And the reason we say that, I want to make it really, really clear. I think we were around it in the first half of this show. But the reason is the enemy is hell-bent committed to making sure it's done.
Oh, yeah.
The enemy knows the relationship between father and son, father and daughter, heavenly father and image-bearing beloved sons and daughters. He knows. He knows.
Yep. And even if you're, father knows best, my three sons, Andy Griffith. Hey, guess what? You're going to do the best you can do as a dad, but what's going to happen is your kids' expectations aren't going to be met. They're going to misinterpret something that you said or didn't say, and it's going to happen.
Yeah. Like in my story, because the enemy operates in the world, in this fallen place, he has plenty of agents. And I'm not just talking about spiritual, demonic agents, demons. I'm talking about people who are very wounded. Wounded people wound people. It could be a teacher. It can be a coach.
Yep.
It can be a Sunday school teacher. It can be Cub Scouts. There's just so many, as you said, you made a point to say it in this series, authority figures.
Mm-hmm.
Our young hearts, our youthful wonder years, right? That's all we're saying is it's not if, it's when. And some of it has happened from and by our fathers and mothers. And yet it's definitely easy to say it all happened under their watch.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of our friends have horrible babysitter stories, have camp stories. I mean, just all kinds of things that have happened, unfortunately. It's real.
It's real.
Spiritual battle is real.
It's real, and it influences how you father, and you carry it with you. And most of the men that we have interacted with are trying to work through these things, trying to figure out their false self, their woundedness, the vows and agreements they've made. Somewhere around their 40s is typically when it kind of starts, maybe late 30s, beyond the point where most people are starting to have children. So it's like, when you're 45, your kids are maybe in college or whatever, teenagers or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you've had plenty of time to wound them.
I think, SJ, the significance of what you just said is it seems like in our 30s, the system starts breaking down.
Yeah.
You got 100,000 miles on your engine. You got 100,000 miles on your tires. And you got 100,000 miles on your brakes, and they're not going to. And so the system starts to erode. And what we learned to self-protect, self-promote, provide all those things that, the conditional life, the performance life, all of that stuff in his love and mercies, it's like God says, okay, it's time to dismantle and rebuild this for something better because it's in there. Because he's in there, she's in there. And so when I think about wounding my kids, I think, SJ, part of this is a point we're laboring to just say it's going to happen. And a secret to fathering is acknowledging that. You live in a war, you live in a battle, so do your kids. And as much as you are to advocate for them, and as much as you want to provide and protect, right, we have been the wounder. Part of my biggest regrets, and you mentioned this, is I know I wounded my girls, Ashley, Hannah, and Abby, by telling them how they should feel, telling them what they should think. And in there is an impatience and an unkindness that, just like I said earlier on the show, 1,000 mosquito bites. I think the enemy used that and used me to deliver packages that I can't be trusted with their heart. When I say that, I can't be trusted with their thinking. I can't be trusted with their
how they feel about something.
Yeah. I didn't know, because it wasn't really done for me, and I'm not blaming, I'm seeing. And I didn't have the skills and the ability to really validate them and come alongside of them, even when they were little, right? It's just easier to tell them what to do. My oldest daughter, we were together in this quarantine, and we spent some time just hanging out and talking, and some music came on, and I kind of started doing the dad shuffle, right? And I started snapping my fingers, and my daughter said, you've always snapped your fingers. Yeah, that's exactly how I looked. I wish you could see SJ like, huh. That doesn't sound like a compliment coming, right?
What does that mean?
Yeah. and she gave me the package of when we were moving towards something we shouldn't. I just remember
to get their attention.
Snapping a finger, it even can trigger.
Wow.
What's that sound?
Wow.
right? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, it was wounding when, hey, raising the volume. And my dad had this skill, I think, too. It was kind of the ventriloquist dad, who can put his molars together and still talk.
He's not.
Would you get off? Come here right now. You
Many times have I told you
You can't get a lot of volume, but what you do and how I've wounded my daughters is the intensity. And it really doesn't matter what I want to say next in terms of the details, because there's some details. But the intensity, the finger snap, the not letting them think or feel, but rather telling them how to think or feel, that's the boxes that have been collected. Not against me, but eventually that's what the enemy really wants to do, is build a case against you.
Right.
That you're not safe.
From their perspective. And from your perspective, that you're not good and that you're not safe.
Yeah.
And that you've failed as a father.
And when they're 4, 5, and 6, and 14, they're not going to have a good sit down with you and help you as a dad. So, Dad, when you do that.
Yeah. Here's how it makes me feel.
They just take it in. They just take it in. As many of you did as when you were sons and daughters. They just take it in. And they don't have the categories for this. And that's why the enemy creates these files and boxes. The wounds have messages. Something's wrong with me. I don't know what I'm doing. He doesn't like me. I know he loves me, but he doesn't like me. I mean, and this starts to rival all the good stuff that we are trying to bestow and offer. It's a very conflicting message. So
what comes up in me as you're sharing that too, Michael, is what's wonderful about all of that is that there's an opportunity for redemption. If you can, fathers, get your heart back,
right,
you can go after the wounded hearts of your kids, because that's what I've watched you do, and that's what I do with my son. But I had to get my heart back first,
right,
to be able to figure out, okay, that clenching of the jaw or the snapping of the finger, I'm not right in doing that. That's based on something connected to a wounded moment in my childhood, and unraveling that so that then you can invite Jesus into that moment of redemption.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you're saying, and I know it's true, because if you get your heart back, when those moments come, SJ, you're not defending yourself. But before, I had some orientation, and before I was experiencing some healing and validation from the Heavenly Father and the restoration of me, when those accusations or those files got brought up, my false self was so quick to the moment to explain, well, you don't understand.
You don't know how crazy you kids were. I had to keep you from killing yourselves or whatever.
The crazy thing I'm doing again is trying to tell them how to think and how to feel. And it's not helpful.
No.
It's more wounding. That's why so many of us have just kind of given up on our parents. In our 30s and 40s, if your parents are still here, and they don't want to enter into this larger conversation. I mean, I wouldn't drop a text or an email or a phone call. Dad, can I talk to you about some stuff? He has no idea what you're about to bring.
Right. Can I talk about how you wounded me as a child, Dad?
No. Yeah, I mean, there's another, and we'll talk about that in the next show, about how to approach
fighting for them.
Forgiveness, reconciliation, reconnecting, and fighting for the hearts of your kids, and maybe even fighting for the hearts of your parents.
Yeah, fighting for the hearts of the little boy that's locked away in your heart.
But you were leading us to a great place with this wounding them. Let's talk about, what do you do? We've established that you've done it.
Yeah.
But what happens when this comes to light, when either they bring it to you or you see it?
Yeah.
You see what you're doing. What can we share with our listeners? No list, right? But what categories or themes could we share with them that have been helpful to bringing healing rather than explanation or justification?
I definitely want to talk about that, but just to complete the circle in your story.
Okay.
Can you connect that behavior, this finger snapping, to a wounding moment in your childhood? What's the wound that happened to you or the agreement you made that led you to father that way, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I saw it. I had lots of little encounters, and I'm sure my mom and dad were just trying to keep me from killing my brother or my brother's killing me.
No, this isn't blame or accusation. It's we're seeing it.
I saw some of that. And I think one of the things that I watched my dad do, when we would hurt each other, that would really, really bother my dad. I mean, I'm talking about hurt. When we got too rough, off the top bunk or, off the back of the couch or into the stairs.
The bat makes a funny sound when I hit my, my brother on the head.
And I'm talking about when we would hurt each other, hit too hard, push too far.
And you knew it was too far.
Yeah. And that usually made one brother go tell on the other brother. So man, when you saw your mom or dad coming down the hall at you, I mean, you're actually begging your brother, don't go tell. I'll give you you can have all my cookies tonight. Right. So again, I'm not saying that we didn't deserve some kind of correction, but I'm saying how correction came.
And the demonstration of it.
It was a judicial system.
Yeah.
That we came to know pretty well.
Yeah.
It involved spanking back then. It involved, it wasn't called timeout. It was called
stand in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or,
there were other things.
Sit there and think about what you've done.
Yeah. You were just isolated in different ways. So again, the fine lines of these, there's so many, but I saw that. I saw correction.
Do you think it's connectable to the performance-based life that you lived, especially when you were, a teenager?
Yeah. When I got really, really serious about some athletics and some sports, and the code continues, coaches operate from the same, most of them back then. You're talking about anger, not anger management. I mean, just that is the method of how to get from somebody who somehow's got the whistle or somehow's in the position where they are trying to make you afraid intentionally or somehow, some way, that what's coming down the hall is not good.
Yeah.
And so, I've got funny memories. It's funny now, right?
Right.
But when you're 8, 9, and 10, your brother's following your mom or you're bringing your dad to.
So I don't want to turn this into a light situation, but man, I remember some of those moments. And the worst was when my brother would stand behind my mom while my mom's reading me the riot act, and like, oh man.
Oh yeah.
That was
it's like
the worst.
He doesn't know you share a room at that time.
Yeah, man. I know where you sleep, dude.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I think you're making a great point that we see some of this. It's modeled, or we participated as the son, as a boy, when privileges are taken away. I didn't get to drive for a week. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea when my kids are 16 or 17.
Yeah.
To your point, where did you learn that? And then did you say, well, I like that way, or I'll never do that to my kids? So there's so
Two
many
sides of that
there's
coin.
so many good, interesting things in the parent conversation.
Yeah, I'll rip this Band-Aid off, though. I'll just tell you, the agreements I made, this is something that as we've been talking, I've kind of had this processor going in the background, even in the midst of our conversation. You asked me about the messages of the wounds. I'm on my own. And I think the way I said it was, my feelings don't matter. I remember moments of fathering my son where I communicated those things to him. And you got to figure this out. I'm not going to do it for you. You're old enough now to do it. Get off your ass and go.
Doesn't matter how you feel.
And yeah, that was a big one, especially when he was younger, when kids of any gender are more prone to cry at the drop of a hat, or, their emotions just come out because they don't know how to control them. One of the few times I went to church before I became a Christian, we're sitting there in church and Stephen was probably 5 and he's whining and complaining and wriggling around, and I pinched the crap out of him, like on his side, and he yelped and said, "Dad, why'd you do that?" Right. So I'm busted immediately, but it was like I'm trying to parent his behavior because he's embarrassing me.
Yeah.
Many times I remember, get it together, man.
Yeah.
It's not that big a deal. I used to say that to him. It's not that big a deal.
I know. These are embarrassing.
But I connect that directly to what I was told as a child. And I'm not saying my parents said those things to me, but those were the agreements that came. Those were the messages that came. So all of that to say, now Stephen's 17, 18, 19 years old, going to school. And at the time I didn't know, but he was going through a really hard time. And I didn't find out until after he had come home from school how hard a time he was going through. And we got to have a conversation. My first response was, dude, why didn't you call me? Right? Yeah.
Because I didn't want another lecture.
Yeah, I didn't want a lecture. I didn't want to be told that how I felt didn't matter. I didn't want to be told, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do it. He didn't say it that way, but that was the reality of it. So we got to have a lengthy conversation, and over several conversations have been able to redeem our relationship in that regard. Yeah. And now he calls me on a regular basis for, things that are in the grand scheme of things minor. Where should I take my car to have it repaired? Right. Or can I do it myself? Awesome. And things are, how do I ask this girl to marry me? Or when should I get married? Or what's involved with that? Or, so there's been quite a bit of redemption there. And it's come at the process, the effort of getting my own heart back was engaged in.
Yeah. And he has seen that over time.
Yeah.
And you've won back ground that was lost.
Right.
And that he is trusting you more with life, direction, skills, decisions. So I want to get the last of our couple minutes here with some encouragement, because it's so important. It's not if you've wounded him, it's you have. So let me start with what not to do. Don't ask him, have I wounded you?
Yeah, with your pen and paper.
I heard these two knuckleheads talking about wounding, and everybody's been wounding. So how have I wounded you?
How have I wounded you?
Yeah.
Write a list. Here you go. Throw the pad across the table.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Please. I like what you said earlier about, this idea of redeeming, this idea of listening really was my first encouragement.
It's a great one.
Begin to listen. Listen to your heart. Listen to the echoes of things, the rhythm of things. Listen to how you're processing them. I like what you said too, SJ. If your children aren't asking you any questions, something's not right.
Yep.
The damage is done. Now, again, don't go ask them, why don't you ask me any questions? We're not advocating the direct approach here. As a matter of fact, we're actually advocating the opposite. You have got to be cunning here.
Yeah, this is sneaky. Not sit them down in the interrogation room, right?
No,
this is
starting to see and pay attention. Listen.
Yeah.
Listening to what's going on, listening to the dynamic between the kids.
How you're provoked.
Where it takes you to anger or frustration, because the spirits of anger and frustration absolutely want to bring division between you and your son, you and your daughters.
Yep.
So listen. If they're not asking you questions, what I am going to encourage SJ is that you start asking them.
Mm-hmm.
It can start with, how was your day? But if that's the only one you have in your pocket, then you really aren't ready for any kind of conversation, especially if you have teenagers, right? You may need 3 or 4. And this is why you got to get your heart back, because you're going to compete with that phone. You're going to compete with their social media, the social circles,
all that, college.
All that. It took some time to get you in this place. It's going to take you some time, Dad, Mom, to get out of this place.
It's been 4 or 5 years for me. Yeah, with Stephen.
So as you pursue the restoration of your heart, being fathered by God, this is a really important pitch for, if this is interesting to you, parents, fathers, go get episodes on the masculine journey.
Mm-hmm.
That's an 8-weeker, I think, or maybe 9. And you can translate it into the feminine journey. It's not that hard to do. But through the masculine journey, through the stages of masculinity, wounding and restoration, what's needed. And I think that's a great resource for more. But back to listening, paying attention, being awake, and then asking questions, which also means listen some more. And then I would say, tell some stories.
Yeah, go back in your own story and be vulnerable with them about it.
Not in defense of what you're doing.
Or explanation even. Just what that is intimacy.
Yeah, you don't want to get the spotlight off of them. Actually, you're trying very hard to get the spotlight on them.
Right. So let me tell you what happened when I was a kid.
That ain't nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let me tell you when I was a kid.
Right. We had gravel in our food and we were happy.
Every now and then we got milk on it, for cereal. But
that's not helpful.
That's not helping. But I think having the stories, I tell you another thing that served me, again, like a lot of dads, we'd love to have some moments over again. But there are certain times, it's usually in the evening, you can come and stand in a doorway and check on them. If they're young enough that you can tuck them in, start tucking them in.
Yep.
Read a book, show them something that you read or you found. Don't tell them what you're learning, show them. with phones and iPads and stuff. Ask them what they're seeing. On the Father's Day resources, we're creating 5 devotionals that involve films with sons and daughters, just something to watch with them, to feel their pulse and temperature on what are they seeing.
Right.
The agenda of sharing what you want them to see, that's there, but it's as important, if not more important, what do they see?
Yeah. And for you to recognize that how they feel and what they see matters.
Yeah. To do that well, like you said, SJ, to recognize how they
feel and what they see matters. Yeah.
Your heart has to be validated in what it sees and what it feels by the Father, validated. That goes back to the first show. You got to get your heart back first. And so as you do that, it's going to be a huge opportunity to father differently. And we believe father well as you, what we're going to talk about in the next show, fight for the hearts of your kids.
Yeah. Michael, another one that just came into my head, and we actually have to finish this series, and COVID kind of interrupted it, but the 4 pillars of Zoe. And the first one is intimacy with God, because everything that we talk about flows out of that relationship with him. And so going back and exploring the intimacy that you may or may not have with God, that's going to translate to the intimacy that you're capable of having with others.
Inviting your children into.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good.
Again, as we kind of ramp up for Father's Day, we got one more episode, maybe 2 coming to you, but Father's Day is right around the corner. I want to encourage you to visit zoe.org/fathers-day. Check out what we've got there for you. We've got a bunch of resources available to you, some of them free, some of them, are gifts that you could give to yourself or to others. But we want to really encourage you to take the opportunity to not just celebrate Father's Day or to be celebrated, but celebrate the opportunity that you have to grow in intimacy with God and with your children and the other people around you. It really is a gift, and I hope we've communicated that to you through the telling of our stories today and our transparency.
You were vulnerable.
Yeah, man, I was vulnerable. So it'll be good when my son listens to this. We'll be able to have some further conversations, but it'll be good. Yeah, thanks for listening out there. And I want to say, if you can take a moment and give us a rate, a review, a subscribe, and share the show with others, it helps us out a bunch. Thanks to Brooke and Serena, our awesome engineers, for making us sound so good. Yeah, until then, till next week.
Yeah, explore more.
See you then.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the life of more by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.